Okay, and welcome to Parenting for Positive Results, the workshop, the Montessori in the Home edition. And in this workshop, we are going to be focusing on, as a Montessori teacher, the triangle. And you learn a lot about relationships when you're studying Montessori, and she talks about this equal triangular relationship of the parent or the teacher, the child, and the environment. And the parent or the teacher has the ability to prepare the environment for the child. And it's really this equal triangular relationship, whereas in Montessori education, the teacher is the guide. So we're going to learn how to be the guide to our child or children. And I'm so excited because what we're going to do is pick 3 different goals throughout the 6 weeks. So we have a goal that we're going to talk about with the parent, like what's a personal goal that we can have. What's a environmental goal? I'm probably more going to focus on like a physical, like what, tidying up, decluttering, like that type of physical goal for the environment. And then a goal for our relationship with our kids or our spouse. You got it? Mm-hmm. And within that, so that's where all like the positive communication comes in and the nonviolent communication. So I'm so excited to have you here. And what we're going to talk about first is effective discipline and what's the criteria for effective discipline. But before I do that, I will introduce myself a little bit. So before I was mom to Maggie is now almost 12. She'll be 12 in November. My middle daughter, Annie, who's is 9. She just turned 9. And my son, Walter, who's 6. Before I was mom, I was a Montessori educator. So in the year 2000, I started teaching in a Montessori classroom for 3 to 6-year-olds. And I taught for several years. And then I was the director of that preschool kindergarten program, Summit Montessori School up in Massachusetts. And it was there that I started to, study discipline and the children and these 4-year-old boys and the parents. And I had a lot of ideas for the parents, helping them through navigate. And then I was an assistant head of school at a large Montessori school up in Littleton, Massachusetts, Oak Meadow School. And as the, like the assistant head, I was the disciplinarian. And I had a lot of 7th and 8th grade girls in my office. And I had a lot of 4-year-old boys in my office, more for like the teachers to take a little break, take a breather. And I had a lot of teachers, the drama teacher and the gym teacher, I said after leaving that school, I could be like a psychologist because I was doing a lot of, listening and helping solve relationship struggles. And then a lot of parents were in my office and I had all this great advice, but I wasn't even a mom yet. So I was still, this was all, research and studying and learning from disciplined experts. So then I became a mom and I was like, whoa, this is really hard. This is really hard. And Maggie was about 2.5 and I was pregnant with my second and I was just really struggling. She was strong-willed and didn't want to do what I wanted her to do. She didn't want to wear what I wanted her to wear. She didn't want to get into her car seat. It was a struggle and I was exhausted. I remember right after I had Annie, I was like, how do I go to a store with this toddler, this wild child. And what do I do? So I learned, I was consulting at a school at the time doing their parent education. And the head of school said, have you ever heard of positive discipline? And I said, oh, positive discipline. Oh yeah, I saw Jane Nelson speak at a conference. And then I was like, let me go get that book. So I dusted off the Positive Discipline for Preschoolers. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense to me. And I really resonated with the philosophy. So I went to be trained as a positive discipline facilitator for parents. And then I was trained to be a positive discipline facilitator for teachers. So I love the teacher training part and the parent training, but more so I do it for my own sanity and for my own, because I've learned a lot. And however, what I'm excited to focus on in the next 6 weeks is a lot of the mindset piece, because we're going to have the goal to focus on ourselves and the parent. How can we get ourselves in this positive mindset to be the role model for your child? So I would love if anybody has any questions, and if you have any questions, you can always put it in the chat, and you can let me know about anything. So one of the things that is a positive discipline tool, and it's this 5 criteria for effective discipline, is being kind and firm. So kind and firm. And kindness shows respect for the child, and firmness shows respect for the situation. It could be around boundaries, or we are the parent and we have that prefrontal cortex fully developed. We're going to learn about that today too. Is the brain in the palm of our hand, which, Elizabeth, that's Dan Siegel in the book that you're reading. Have you gotten to that part yet?
Yes, I have. And yes, how that's a key point to this, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know if you've heard of the program Go Zen. Have you seen that?
No.
So it just went on my radar, and I bought the whole curriculum. So we're going to learn about that too. So Go Zen is this amazing woman she studied positive psychology, which is what positive discipline is based off of, and animation. And she created all these cartoons for children to watch, to learn about their brain. And she really focuses on fear, anxiety, and worry. So I'm watching them with the kids, and it's great because you learn all about the brain. So we're going to talk about that, the brain. But back to being kind and firm. So that's one criteria, is kind and firm at the same time. So we're going to be focusing on that a lot with the positive communication that we're going to learn with that asking versus telling, that you have in that. The kids are home. Now what are we going to do in that video series? So kind and firm at the same time. Now this is where it's really hard. And this is what I love when my mentor, Jane Nelson, did this. So I'm going to pull my little easel over. Okay, so there is 4 different types of parents. And if we had this, you could see the cross. And if this is kind and this is firm, we're going to look at these 4 different boxes. And first we're going to start with, so this is, very kind and not so kind. And this is very firm and not so firm. So if we were going to think of this parent here, who's very firm, but not very kind, what, you can come up with some ideas and yell them out, but what type of characteristics would that type of parent be? Like the very rough and firm, not so kind. So it might be a lot of control. It might look like yelling, a lot of yelling, and this type of parent. So there's all these characteristics, and this type of parent is called, well, I'm going to take it on a little bit. So it could be, physical punishment. And then this parent over here, who's very kind, but not very firm, what does that look like? Very kind and not very firm. There might be any characteristics there?
Maybe no boundaries.
No boundaries.
A chaotic schedule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The kids make the rules, like kids manipulating and making the rules. And sometimes this very kind and not so firm. And then there's this parent over here that's not kind and not firm, and we're not even going to talk about this parent today. This parent is called the permissive parent. This parent is called the permissive parent, and this parent is called the authoritarian style. So these are the 4 parenting styles. This is the authoritarian style. And this parent here is, oh no, I'm sorry. This is the permissive. This is permissive. And this is neglect. And you're just neglectful. This is firm and kind. Between this parent, where we're in control and we've got to do this, and then we go back and forth from being, this parent of, well, okay, I'll let you do this, like you're being a little too kind and then you go back to being a little punishment. Well, it gets a little crazy and chaotic, a little punishment. So parents are kind of more going back and forth in between these 2 roles. But what we're going to try to learn how to be is this parent, and this is called authoritative. So as an authoritative parent, it might be a little bit more democratic. And what might that look like? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today with positive discipline and some of the tools that we're going to learn right away, day 1. So when you're kind and firm at the same time. And the other criteria for effective discipline is, this is the long range goals, like this is where this is hard. And why would I have a 6-week course on this? Because there's so many skills to learn, and we're just building this child. Like we don't have control over this being. Like they are their own beings. So how can we be that guide? But it's the long range goals. And I think we did this, and Elizabeth, you were there at the workshop last year. And when we talked about what are all the challenges, and we were like, and we made a whole list of the challenges. And I'm not going to brainstorm the list right now. And actually, I'm going to move this screen out of the way because it's my bad handwriting. But some of the challenges that I've been hearing from parents, and there's many right now, and I would love for Elizabeth, you to add any challenges that you're having. But when I do the workshop with schools, the parents will come up with this whole list of challenges, you know, and maybe you and I can quickly brainstorm a list, but I'm definitely having a lot of more sibling fighting and a lot of sibling time. So that's something that we're working on, is the sibling fighting. What are some big challenges that you are having?
I think the sibling fighting is a good one, because at first they became closer, you know, in the spring and March, and you know, it was really lovely to see. I think they've both become closer to the youngest one, who's 2, but between the 6-year-old and 8-year-old, it's getting a bit much, really. And so I would say yes, number 1, sibling. Then I suppose number 2, it's for me, being the teacher and the parent is difficult. They're 2 very different roles, and I also find I'm quite an emotional person as well. So I kind of wish that I could discipline in an unemotional way, so not get upset when they're naughty, but just to think about it rationally, and not, you know, because sometimes afterwards my head aches and I feel awful because, you know, I've been so cross with them. You know, you just feel physically and mentally drained, and when you have to, you know, it would be easier. My husband's much better at detaching himself and not having that emotional, you know, and just saying this is not good behavior, you know, not getting physically upset, you know, making or whatever because they're being so naughty. You know, and I think that would be a really good skill, that sort of dispassionate, standing back and seeing what's not okay, and what's all right to let go.
And that's the biggest challenge, right? It's when we're feeling the physically and emotionally exhausted at the end of the day. And yeah, like I did it last night. I yelled at my little 6-year-old son, like, and I was just like, get in your chair, because I was just done. I'm like, just sit down and eat. And my husband said, he's like, why are you yelling? And I'm like, oh, I know, right? Like, why am I yelling? And you're just exhausted at the end of the day. So that's something that I'm going to be working on too for the 6 weeks, is the yelling, and then the kids are yelling at each other too, and everyone's yelling. So it's the homeschool piece. And I was saying to a couple teacher friends, I'm like, I used to be a teacher, but I did not want to teach my kids. Like, I did not sign up for this. I stopped teaching for a reason. And it's hard to be a teacher, but it's harder, like, to teach your own kids. It's different. It's very different. So
I really enjoy it when it's one-on-one with the 6-year-old. I can just about do grade 2 maths, and I really enjoy it. And he's a really enthusiastic learner, and, you know, he doesn't want to do it all the time, but, you know, we can break it up, and you know, and I really enjoy that with him. But it's when 2 of them are together, and they're both in different grades, they both have got very different intellectual abilities and very different interests. And you know, I don't want it to become a battle. I want probably the most important thing, more than anything else they learned this year, I just hope that I don't destroy their enthusiasm for education, for life.
yes.
I just want them to have a positive, you know, it's a long time you're learning. Hopefully they go to university, and even if they don't, it's still, you know, a long time that they're learning. And I want them to be always enthusiastic about that and have positive associations with school and with, you know, or however they're getting their education, through school or through home. So that's sort of my main goal for the end of the year, is that they, still want to go to school next year
Yeah.
if it opens properly. And also the other thing, particularly for my daughter, is that I'm realizing as she's getting older, she's 8 now, so I guess her brain is sort of slightly in a different phase than my son, but she's starting to get anxious now. She's a shy and sensitive person, and she's starting to get anxious, and I really I don't want to for that to develop, and I want to sort of nip that in the bud, really, in terms of her schoolwork, but also her personality. I don't want her to worry about or be anxious about things. I want her to be able to go to sleep, which she is not at the moment. And so that's probably the main thing. I'm just conscious of her, really.
I know. That's why I'm so excited to learn about how to use the positive psychology on the kids with this the Go Zen program. It's super cool. And we'll talk a lot about the brain and like what we can do, and so much too. And I don't know if you have developed any type of a meditation practice or not yet, but we're going to be doing some meditation throughout the 6 weeks. And so I am going to challenge us to just do it. And it's so funny because so many people say, well, I just don't have time. I don't have time to meditate. And it's like, it's 5 minutes. Like all it is 5 minutes. And if you have to set your alarm 5 minutes sooner to just like get it in, it makes such a difference as a mom to have a little bit of, and it's all the brain science. The meditation gives you that pause. It helps you to have that pause where instead of just reacting and yelling or being cross, like you said, and that, it just gives you the pause to take the deep breath. And have you ever done, and maybe we'll even just do it right now because I kind of need it, the yoga breathing, the breathing in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Have you done that yet?
Yes, I have. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'm excited for like this whole hour workshop because I'm gonna do one of the positive discipline lessons like with you really quickly. And you may have done this already, but if you're home watching this, because some people are going to be watching this on the replay, I want you to do what I'm doing. So, and I see you, Elizabeth, so I might move my chair back just a little bit, but so what you're going to do is we're going to first do the deep yoga breath. So we're going to breathe in for 4, a deep breath in, and you hold it for 7, and you're out for 8. And then as soon as the breath's all the way out, you're going to breathe in for 4 and hold it for 7 and then out for 8. So one of the first lessons that I learned with the positive psychology course is using that yoga breath and teaching your kids to use it. So for that anxious child, teaching them to do the yoga breath. And when they have that worry, when the worry is in their head, and we'll talk about how to talk to the kids about how to calm the worry and what the worry is, and that the worry is actually an important thing. It's an important function of the brain, but it's also the part of the brain that is fear, and it helps that fight-flight response. And some kids are worrying too much and it's going off, that fight-flight response. So they're feeling anxious and they literally having physical feelings. So that breath is always good. So what we're going to do is you're going to do what I say. So if you could sit up tall, and I'd love you to take your 2 hands and tap your knees. Just tap your knees. And you're going to stop and put your hands in the air. You're going to make a little circle, and you're going to put that circle right on your chin. Can you put it right on your chin?
I nearly didn't put it there. But I can see, yes, okay.
So what
I
is
have to
that?
think about that.
What is that teaching us?
That you have to do what you say, not just say something. You have to be doing the same thing as you're saying.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually their mirror neurons. And you saw me put it on my cheeks, and so many people just go right ahead and put on your cheeks. It's monkey see, monkey do neurons. And these neurons, it's more recent research about the last 15 years. Dr. Dan Siegel is one of them, and they these neurologists discovered monkey see, monkey do neurons. And it not only works for our actions. You know, if you see someone yawn, you're gonna yawn. If you see someone cry, you might feel that. I feel that. I'm a very sensitive person, and I start to well up. But it not only works for our actions, it also works with our emotions. So, like we said, like we're so physically and emotionally exhausted. I mean, this has been really challenging these last 6 months. So how can we, you know, be that in better physical and mental shape so that we can not, you know, have those positive emotions around our kids. So yeah, the other, you know, I'm going to kind of jump back to a couple more tools with what effective discipline is. So we talked about being kind and firm, and we talked about this is the long range goal. So we talked a little bit about our challenges now, but really what I would love for you to think about is closing your eyes and imagining your child at age 25. And what are the gifts, you know, like what are these life skills and characteristics that you hope and dream for this 25-year-old? And this is something I would love for you to, you know, maybe ask. This is a really great activity to do with like your spouse or your parenting partner is, you know, make a list of like, what are the qualities? Like, what are your values? What are your characteristics that you hope and dream that your 25-year-old child will have? Like imagining him coming home, your son coming home. And so what are those skills? And I'll say some, anyone can add, but what would be those characteristics and life skills?
I would say happiness.
Happiness. Mm-hmm.
And kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of self-satisfaction in a way. So, you know, feeling not necessarily successful, but successful in your own way, you know, whatever you have wanted to do or would like to do, you're motivated enough to try and achieve that.
Mm-hmm. And I always like to add, for my kids to have a sense of humor and resourcefulness, like responsibility and resourcefulness. Like I really want to instill this like work ethic. It says my internet's a little unstable, but we'll keep going and see.
Did you say independent, Kristen?
Independent is a good one. Mm-hmm.
And have empathy for others.
Mm-hmm.
Be self-aware, I guess, as well.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add, you know, self-confident. I worry, and I don't even want to say it out loud, but like, you and I have a daughter at similar age, and my oldest is going to be 12 and middle school. And I just so want her to be self-confident, because it's really, I worry about girls and, going through puberty and some, not so niceness that's gonna, I want to build their self-confidence now so that they can make the good choices later.
And actually, as I get older as well, I realise so much is to, especially with girls, so much in life is to do with confidence, isn't it? And not having it, and what happens when you don't have it. And, it is possibly the most crucial thing, I think, actually, isn't it? Self-confidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I, like you said before, the love of learning. I don't want to lose that at all during this year.
Yeah, curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of the positive discipline lessons around this is, we talked about some of the challenges and the sibling fighting and the just being physically and mentally exhausted, I think too, is a huge one, and all the yelling and dealing with anxiousness. And I know like some adults are feeling that anxiety, and it's this is hard times. No one's ever been parenting in a pandemic for many, many years, so this is challenging. But if we can look ahead to the lists that we just made, and you and I made a great list, and I'm sure for people at home to do this with their parenting partner, like, don't you think that would be a valuable thing to talk to your spouse about? Is what are their big goals? Like, my husband might think something differently than I do too, but we talked about having happiness, being happy, making good choices, kind, having the self-satisfaction, having that self-confidence, having curiosity and a strong work ethic and independence and empathy for others and being self-aware. And, that's a big, like, there's a lot of responsibility there. But so many times when we are struggling and our kids are yelling at each other and the kids are fighting and we're just like, oh, so it's how we can look at the long range goals, it's long term, and teach to that. And that's where positive discipline is not synonymous with punishment. And so many times I think people think of discipline and they think of punishment. I'm going to discipline you. I'm going to punish you. But the discipline that we're going to learn is more teaching. So discipline is based on the Latin root word disciplina, which really means a disciple, a follower of the truth, and to teach. So we're going to learn to teach these skills, because another characteristic of effective discipline is teaching valuable social and life skills. So it's being kind and firm. It's, but we're looking at the long range goals. It's teaching valuable social and life skills. So I think too, just within the year that we're having, I think to have these social emotional skills is really important. And a lot of times when I'm doing these workshops at schools, we'll talk about emotional intelligence is really more important than intellectual intelligence to survive in this world, I think. And, people can read, and there are very intellectual people and very smart people, but to have that emotional intelligence is something I want to teach my kids. So the other criteria for effective discipline, and this is where the Montessori in the home piece comes in. And so I'm really excited to do this work with you, like, for the next 6 weeks, because I know our house, it was like a tornado went off after the spring and the summer, and we just moved. So like, we just have, how do we create this home environment, this Montessori home? And a Montessori home is more a child accessible home. So how can we set up the kitchen to allow the kids to be more autonomous, more independent? There's so much they can do. And we might have an opportunity here, like having the time home that we're going to be having. And luckily right now my kids are in school every other day, hybrid, but I think we're probably all going to be distance learning in the winter, unfortunately. But how do we create this home environment for the child to be autonomous? So that's another big criteria for effective discipline, is that autonomy. Do you have any questions so far about, because I'm kind of teaching a little bit right now, but I feel like this foundation, it's so important to learn a little bit about the foundation of positive discipline. It's based on this effective discipline or anything.
No, I think that it will make sense, and what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah, so those, that's basically where it is based on with what humans, all human beings have this innate need for belonging and significance. So Rudolf Dreikurs and Alfred Adler, who were the founding fathers of positive discipline, they found this need in all human beings, this need for belonging and significance. And if the child doesn't feel this sense of belonging and significance, and it's a sense of, because it's their perception, so it's their perception and their interpretation. And belonging could look like unconditional love. Belonging is unconditional love. I belong in this family. My mom and dad love me no matter what. I have unconditional love, belonging. And significance can look, it can be like power. You know, I have significance. I have power over my life. I have a little say. And this is where positive discipline, sometimes parents are like, well, how come you can't just say, this is the way it is, you know, and maybe this is how we were parented, is like, well, it's my way or the highway, and like, just do it, you know, like this is the way it is. Or within that, when we talked about the 4 types of parents, that authoritarian parent who's maybe yelling and this very strict, and there's no, you know, no crossing that. So how do we, you know, go from there? So a little bit about the belonging and the significance, and where, and I think I have a very poor picture of this, but I'm just going to get this picture of because I feel like not the best picture, but if you look at this chart that I made, and this is supposed to be an iceberg, and what we see is the tip of the iceberg. We see the behavior, or we see the misbehavior, or, you know, or so we think. But what we're going to become is like this detective for our child. And we're going to figure out what is the belief behind the behavior. And the belief behind the behavior is based on this, that they need to feel this belonging and significance. And it might be something that we did that they don't feel this belonging and significance, you know, like, I know, like when I said, like when I yelled at my son the other day, like, of course he's gonna like not want to do what I want him to do because I was being so mean to him. So he didn't feel that love, that unconditional love. Or it might be when we are trying to control a situation, and sometimes we do have to be in control, like have the power over them, but they don't feel like they have the power, so they're going to fight back. And what Rudolf Dreikurs discovered is that when children didn't have this sense, they chose four different types of behavior. And so they are called with the four mistaken goals. Like, these children choose one of these mistaken goals to get the belonging and significance back. So the first one is undue attention. And this is where, Elizabeth, you're going to love this, because you have every developmental age right now. You have the toddler, and you have the 6-7-year-old, and he's going through a huge developmental stage too, change. And then the 8, almost a 9-year-old, and that's I feel like that's a huge year for that 9-year-old when they become 9. So within that, the undue attention is what you'll see more with like little kids, the whiny behavior, or the always wanting your attention. The second mistaken goal is misguided power. And that's when you have the control issue of like, well, I want you to do this, and they're pushing back, misguided power. The third mistaken goal is revenge. Well, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you. You want me to do my homework, so I'm just not going to do it. This revenge cycle, and it's like this cycle they keep on like hurting back and forth. And the fourth behavior, which is really, sad, and it's not necessarily that kids go into these 4 separate mistaken goals, but it does kind of seem that way. It's like developmentally, it starts with undue attention, and then the misguided power, and revenge, maybe with those teenagers. And then the fourth one is assumed inadequacy. And that's when the child is just given up, there's no hope, and that's really sad. And we don't want kids to get to that point, but some kids just do, because they don't have that sense of belonging and significance. But what we're going to learn is how to be that detective. And what's so interesting is there's a whole chart that we're going to work through. It's called the mistaken goal chart. And it's around how we feel. So if we are feeling annoyed and irritated, we're going to get we're going to get more self-aware of what our feelings are. So we're going to think about how we were thinking and feeling and deciding. And that's undue attention, when you're annoyed. And then the misguided power is when we're feeling like, just defeated and disgusted maybe, and just these different feelings that we have. So it's going to be fascinating, because you learn a lot about how our behavior also affects, their behavior too. And a lot of one of the biggest positive parenting idea, or the positive discipline idea, is people do better when they feel better. So how can we help the child to feel better? So if you have any other questions, I might do one last little training on the brain, and then we're gonna go on our merry way. But do you have any questions?
Yeah, I guess it's that thing where you can't control other people's behavior, but you can control your own response to that. And I guess that's really important, isn't it? Especially now, where you're spending so much time together. So I guess a parent is generally always a child's primary influencer, but at the moment there's a lot more time that's being spent together, isn't there? So
there is, and that's the work. That's where I talked about the meditation earlier. Is we have to be taking like radical self-care of ourselves right now, because how do you not react? And when we talked about the mirror neurons, of when I did this, the mirror neurons, that as soon as that negative energy comes in our like field, you get sucked into it. So, you know, and we talked about it earlier of like, this even works with our spouse, because that's something that I've taken from it, from everything I've learned with studying this, is how to do it with my own, you know, relationship with my spouse. Because that's the challenge there, of that when the negative energy comes to you, that's, you know, that's his or that's hers, or when you're talking about your child, like this is their thing, it's not our problem. So like that's a really hard skill to do. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have our right hand, and this is called the brain in the palm of your hand. This could be taught to children. I love this lesson, and it's Dr. Dan Siegel. And Dr. Dan Siegel wrote The Whole Brain Child and The Yes Brain, and he and Tina Payne Bryce or something, like they have a lot of great books. So this is the brain in the palm of your hand. So if you look at your palm down, this is the brain stem. And the brain stem is in charge of all the automatic bodily functions of heart rate and breathing and all the things that we don't even know are happening, but are because of our brain stem. And then if you put your thumb over the middle, that's the amygdala. And this is the midbrain. And this is where the freeze, fight, and flight response lives. This is the major radar. This is, what are you going to do? Are you going to, you know, just freeze up? Are you going to fight? Are you going to yell? Are you going to flight? Are you going to just like, oh, like maybe just leave the scenario or ignore? What are you going to do? But this is also where our emotions and our memories are stored. And then if you put your fingers down, the back is the cortex. It's where all of the senses come in, and the front is the all the thinking happens, and the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, I have a little list here, which I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to read it. So I have a list here if you want to take a quick picture, but is in charge of the regulation of the body. It's in charge of emotional regulation, interpersonal relationships, response flexibility, intuition, mind sight, self-awareness, letting go of fears, and morality. So the prefrontal cortex is in charge of so much. And what happens when our brain is on stress, you know, like when we have just had the day, you know, it's not a good morning, you didn't get any exercise in, you're not feeling good, maybe you're driving, this is the stories I used to be driving to work, and you get caught in traffic and you're just, oh, you're late, you spill some coffee, not a good day at work, you get home, and maybe it's your spouse, maybe like the kids are just, the house is a mess, and somebody just does something to push your buttons. And somehow kids know how to push our buttons so bad. So this is what neuroscientists have discovered happens to your brain. Literally, and earlier we talked a little bit about the mirror neurons. So if we're like this, if our brain has flipped, none of the prefrontal cortex is working. None of those skills are working. And instead, what is exposed?
Fight or flight.
The reptilian brain, they call it, and reptiles eat their young. Reptiles eat their young. Like, this is what's exposed. It's also where our emotions and our memories are stored. So sometimes when we're feeling just, oh, we might sound like our parents, or like if we were yelled at, or like those feelings could come up. So what we're going to learn how to do is to get from here to here. And this is called self-regulation. And this is what we have to teach our kids to do. so this is the work, this is really hard. Because so what I said before is when we were like brainstorming that great list of what we would want our 25-year-old child to have, what our adult, this being when they're an adult on their own, what are all those life skills and characteristics? And that's not developed until the age of 25. So we're really in this for the long haul. We have to be teaching all these skills until the age of 25. So that prefrontal cortex piece is huge. And with the self-regulation, a little piece of it might be meditation, but so much of it is when I do this work with kids, we talk about creating that peace area. So that's what we'll do more in our next workshop, is we'll talk about creating that positive timeout space. Well, we don't have much time, and I don't know if you have to get going, but the positive timeout, because sometimes people do better when they feel better. So if our child is like this and we're just yelling at them, with our rational brain, and we're doing this and we're yelling, they're not going to hear anything. So a positive discipline tool is like, how do you help them to feel better? Because people do better when they feel better. Adults do better when they feel better. So what can we do to make ourselves feel better too? So that was a lot of information. Do you have any other questions? And if anybody, I know there's a few people who are watching this on the replay. There's sometimes some stuff will come up throughout this process, because it is like within I think within parenting, you have to become a little bit more conscious of your actions and your everything. When the kids bring it out in you, you just have to learn how to do it, which is hard sometimes.
My dad told me that he'd never lost his temper until I was born. So that made me think, okay, it is a testing time, isn't it? Even for the most patient person, I think.
I thought I had a lot of patience before this job. Well, and then like what we're doing now is like on top of it, having to be the teacher too. Like it's hard enough to be the parent, and now to have to play that role is it's an extra challenge. And I know all the moms out there, I feel like the people that people feel bad for the most are moms of young children right now. Like so many people are like, oh, I would not want to have little kids right now during this pandemic. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like it's hard. I think we have it.
But then it's a unique time, isn't it? To really work on yourself and make the most of the time with the children, and to really bond together as a family, and to give them skills, because if it's worrying for us, then it's worrying for them, isn't it? And it's a chance to, before they become teenagers, to really help them.
Yes, I think so. And I think that's where, and I'm saying age 25, I left the house at 18. I was 17 actually, because I was young for my grade, but I don't have much longer. I have 6 years left with my oldest. That's not a lot of time. So like, how can we instill these things? And we're going to make a mistake, and they're going to make a mistake. And I make mistakes every day. So like, how do we then recover from these mistakes? But still, while not, like helping them to grow and develop into that 25-year-old that we hope. Well, it was a pleasure to have you live, and we will talk and find our time for our one-on-one. But I appreciate anybody that was watching from home today. And if you have any questions, please reach out. KristenAnchor.com has the registration for this workshop that is going to be live, but on Zoom. And I would actually, though, like I have a few people from my hometown of Weston who's doing this. And I think if we can do a social distance get together throughout it too, which I feel like that is a huge piece of the parent empowerment group, is building a community of support within parents, where it takes a village to raise a child. So that's how can we support each other? And I'm so happy to be in the role that I am, because I feel like I have education around this to help parents. But I will promise you, I am not the perfect parent, and don't think I'm, you know, I make all the mistakes. Before we leave, my favorite mentor, my teacher, Barbara Kinney, who was my trainer, she said, 3 out of 10 times, only 3 out of 10 times, we have to try to be this positive parent, and it's okay if we screw up all the other times. So I don't want anyone feeling guilty after any of my workshops. But okay, so I am going to just stop recording now. I'm gonna